Two men thought humiliating a mother in front of her kids was funny, until a mechanic in a grease-stained shirt calmly shut them down in front of the whole store. He wasn't planning to be anyone's hero that evening. Rodrick Blain, 42, had just finished a long shift at the mechanic shop off Greenwell Springs Road in Baton Rouge. His work shirt still smelled faintly of oil and sweat, and his back ached in that dull, stubborn way it did when the weather hinted at rain. He was just trying to grab a few things: milk, eggs, maybe some smoked sausage, and get home before his niece finished her homework. She'd been staying with him for a few weeks while her mum was working the late shift at the hospital. It had become their little routine: dinner, cartoons, spelling drills. He didn't even grab a cart, just a handheld basket and a mental list. The store wasn't crowded, but there was that evening tension. People with tired eyes, kids whining, someone in a rush, sidestepping someone moving too slow. The kind of environment where nobody wants to make eye contact, where everyone's hoping to just get in and get out. Rodrick was halfway through his mental checklist and heading toward the frozen section. That's when he heard it. A voice, loud, sharp, cutting through the low murmur of checkout scanners and squeaky wheels. Then another voice, laughing. Not a fun kind of laugh. The kind that made you clench your jaw before you even knew why. He turned his head, instinctively drawn toward the commotion. Two men stood near the freezer doors. Both were around his age, maybe a little younger. Baseball caps, one with a Bluetooth earpiece. The other had a tattoo crawling up his neck. Their body language was casual, but their voices weren't. They weren't yelling, but they were performing. Just a few feet away stood a young woman, early 30s maybe. She wore a faded hoodie and was trying to juggle two kids, a toddler in the cart seat and a boy about 7 holding onto the side. Her daughter was fussing. Her son stared at the floor. The woman was clutching her snap card like it was a ticking bomb. Rodrick couldn't make out every word the men said at first, but their tone said enough. Should have waited for a man before having all them kids. Bet she's got a different baby daddy for each one. The guy with the earpiece chuckled, shaking his head as if the woman were some punchline. Rodrick stopped walking. Just stood there, 2 feet from the frozen peas, one hand still gripping his basket handle. He watched the woman's shoulders stiffen, her jaw tense. But she didn't look at them. She focused on her daughter, gently rocking the cart back and forth like a cradle. Nobody said anything. Nobody stepped in. He scanned the aisle. People heard it. A teenage cashier had glanced up. An older woman near the produce section was frozen in place, pretending to read a label. But the moment just kept stretching, like everyone was waiting for it to pass on its own. It didn't. Rodrick took a step forward. Not toward the woman, not toward the men. Just forward. His heart started doing that heavy beat. The one you get when your brain hasn't decided yet if you're angry or just ashamed. He'd seen this before. Not the exact scene, but something like it. Different people, different setting, but same message. Same silence. He watched as the boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mama, can we just go?" She bent down, whispered something in his ear. Her voice was low, and her hands were shaking just a little as she reached into her purse. Rodrick took another step. He wasn't a confrontational man, not since his 20s. But something about that kid's voice, something about the way he asked, "Can we just go?" Like the shame belonged to them instead of the grown men. It stirred something inside. And just like that, Rodrick forgot all about the milk and eggs. But before he could open his mouth, the man with the earpiece said one more thing, something that made Rodrick stop in his tracks again for an entirely different reason. "You know," the man with the earpiece said, loud enough for half the aisle to hear, "if she spent less time swiping food stamps and more time working, maybe she wouldn't need handouts." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said it. Loud, like he wanted the whole store to hear him, like he wanted to shame her publicly. Rodrick's hand clenched the basket so tight his knuckles went pale. He was still standing back, half shadowed by the end cap filled with canned soups. From where he stood, he could see the woman's profile. Cheekbones tight, her mouth pressed in a straight line. She wasn't giving them the satisfaction of reacting, but she was clearly on edge. Her son now had both hands wrapped around her waist, like he was trying to anchor her in place. The other man, the one with the neck tattoo, nudged his friend and snorted. "Don't waste your breath. She's probably just going to sell that food to buy a new wig." Rodrick blinked. For a second, he thought he misheard. "Nope." That's what he said. And still, no one. The teenage cashier turned away. The woman reading the fruit label was now obsessively checking her phone. A young guy pushing a cart full of Gatorade made a wide arc around them like he didn't see anything. It felt like everyone was trying to disappear. The mother tried to stay calm. She didn't yell, didn't break down. Instead, she slowly handed her card to the cashier, keeping her eyes on the little screen like her life depended on it. The toddler had quieted, sensing the tension. Rodrick exhaled hard through his nose. He was watching a woman be publicly shamed for needing help. A woman who, from the look of her, was just trying to get through the day with her kids fed and her dignity intact. And two full-grown men, both of whom looked like they hadn't done an honest day's work in a while, thought it was their job to humiliate her. There was something familiar in it. Too familiar. He remembered standing in line with his mother when he was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, at a grocery store off Plank Road. He'd felt the heat of stares back then, the way people looked when his mom pulled out food stamps. She never talked about it. She just said, "Keep your head up and hold the bag, baby." That memory snapped something in him. He stepped closer, finally coming into view. "Hey!" Just one word, but loud enough that both men turned. The one with the earpiece raised an eyebrow. The other smirked. Rodrick kept his voice calm. "Steady. You always talk to women like that? Or is it just when you think no one's going to say anything back?" The men blinked. For a second it seemed like they couldn't decide whether he was joking or not. The man with the tattoo let out a half laugh. "What, you her boyfriend or something?" Rodrick shook his head. "Nah, I'm just a man who knows the difference between a joke and bullying." That caught them off guard. The one with the earpiece opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Rodrick stepped again. Not aggressive, not threatening, but close enough that he was no longer just a voice from the background. Close enough that other people in the aisle were now watching him. "You see a woman with her kids. She's not bothering nobody. She's just trying to pay for groceries. And you decide today's the day you're going to show off how small you really are?" The neck tattoo guy rolled his eyes. "Man, mind your own business." Rodrick didn't blink. "This is my business. Anytime I see a grown man pick on a mother in front of her children like it's sport, yeah, that's my business." A silence settled. Not the kind that means it's over, the kind that means something just shifted. The woman was still standing at the register. Her hands were frozen mid-motion, like she wasn't sure whether to keep packing her bag or watch this play out. Her son looked up at Rodrick with wide, confused eyes. But before either man could clap back, the manager finally appeared, and his first words would change the temperature of the entire room. The store manager's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Sharp, clipped, but just a little late. "Is there a problem over here?" He was a short man in his 50s, thick glasses, khaki shirt tucked into jeans that had seen better days. A name tag read Vince Callahan, and from the way his eyes darted around the scene, it was clear he'd been watching from a distance and was only stepping in because things were getting loud. Rodrick didn't answer at first. He wanted to see who the question was aimed at. The two men stood a little straighter, suddenly aware they might have gone too far. "No problem," the one with the tattoo said, lifting both hands in mock innocence. "We were just talking." "Yeah," the other added quickly. "Nobody touched her or anything." Rodrick glanced over at Vince, who looked back at him like he wasn't quite sure what side of this he was supposed to land on. "Talking?" Rodrick said, his voice steady. "You call that talking?" Vince hesitated. "Look, I just don't want any kind of incident in the store. People are trying to shop." Rodrick took a slow breath. "So you'd rather let these two men harass a woman in front of her kids than deal with the discomfort of stopping it?" Vince flinched at the words. For a moment, the weight of the truth hung in the air, and no one moved. The mother was still standing silently, her hands now gently moving again, placing items into a single reusable grocery bag. She wasn't crying, but her face had that blankness, a kind of emotional shield people build when they've had to pretend things don't hurt for too long. Rodrick looked at her, then back at Vince. "This ain't about comfort, man. It's about right and wrong." The words weren't loud, but they carried. A woman a few feet away, who had been picking out yogurt, suddenly nodded and muttered, "He's right." Then someone else, an older man in a camouflage jacket, murmured, "Ain't no need to talk to a lady like that, especially not with her babies standing there." The tide was turning. The two men sensed it. The guy with the earpiece shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't mean nothing by it," he said, his voice smaller now. "Just having some fun." Rodrick turned to him, shaking his head slowly. "If humiliating someone trying to feed her children is fun to you, you need to take a hard look in the mirror." No yelling, no theatrics, just truth. The tattooed man mumbled something under his breath and started walking off. His friend followed. Vince didn't stop them. Rodrick didn't chase them either. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to be seen standing up, so that woman, her kids, and anyone else in that store would know someone did. Vince stayed behind, hands on his hips. "I'll talk to them if they come back," he offered, weakly. Rodrick didn't answer him. He turned to the woman instead. "You okay?" She looked at him for the first time. Her voice was soft but clear. "Yeah, thank you." The little boy peeked out from behind his mother's hoodie, eyes darting between her and Rodrick. He didn't say anything, but he didn't look afraid anymore either. Rodrick gave the kid a tiny smile. "You helped your mom today. You did good." The boy's mouth twitched, like he wanted to smile back but wasn't sure if it was okay yet. The mother finally spoke again. "People don't usually say anything. They just look." Rodrick nodded. "Yeah, I know. I've been one of those people before." He meant it. He'd kept quiet in other places, other situations, not out of agreement, but because it was easier. Not this time. But just as things were settling down, the boy said something that made Rodrick pause harder than anything the grown men had said. Rodrick was about to grab his basket and let them finish in peace when the boy looked up and said softly, "Are you my mom's bodyguard?" It was so unexpected, so pure, that it stopped Rodrick cold. The woman turned quickly, her eyes wide. "Baby, don't say that." But Rodrick chuckled, just a little. Not mocking, just surprised. He crouched down so he was eye level with the boy. "No, I'm not your bodyguard," he said. "But I saw something that wasn't right. And sometimes when something's wrong, it's your job to say something." The boy looked confused. "Even if it's not your mom," Rodrick hesitated. "Especially if it's not your mom." The mother picked up her bag and reached for her son's hand. "Say thank you," she whispered, her voice still steady, but distant. "Thank you," the boy said, quieter now. Rodrick stood back up, watching them prepare to leave. The toddler had drifted off to sleep against her sister's shoulder in the cart. The mother gave him a polite nod, then turned her attention back to her children and headed toward the door. Rodrick stood there for a second longer, his basket hanging useless from his hand. He wasn't mad anymore. He was tired. Tired of the same kind of people thinking they could say anything to anyone without consequence. Tired of watching kids absorb those lessons without even knowing they're being taught. And tired of walking away from moments that call for something as simple and as hard as speaking up. He headed down the bread aisle, but everything suddenly felt off. He didn't feel like shopping anymore. His appetite had left him somewhere near the frozen pizza. He wandered toward the self-checkout, thinking maybe he'd just grab a drink, something cold, and be done with it. But as he rounded the corner, he spotted them again. The mother and her kids standing by the vending machines near the exit. She was digging in her purse, probably looking for quarters. Her son sat on the bench, gently rocking his sleeping sister. Rodrick slowed his steps. Part of him wanted to keep walking. He'd done his part, hadn't he? But something about the look on her face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was tired. The kind of tired that doesn't go away with a nap. The kind of tired that stacks up over years of being ignored, judged, stepped over. He approached slowly. "You got enough for the machine?" he asked. She looked up, startled. "Oh, I was just seeing if I had change." I told him he could pick a snack if he waited quietly. Rodrick reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled singles. "Let me help." She hesitated. "I didn't ask for—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "You didn't. I'm offering." Her face tightened, just slightly. Pride. The same kind his mother had worn. The same kind that doesn't want a handout, but knows when help is being offered with respect. She nodded once, this time less hesitant. Her son chose a pack of cookies and a juice. Rodrick fed the machine and watched it clunk and groan as it delivered the treat like some kind of clumsy thank you. "What's your name?" she asked. "Rodrick," she offered her hand. Tanya Wells." They shook, and it felt less like strangers meeting and more like two people recognizing something in each other. She looked at him with calm eyes now, not grateful, not indebted, just level. "You didn't have to say anything back there." "I know," Rodrick said. "But I didn't want your son thinking that silence was normal." She swallowed, then looked at her boy. He was tearing into the cookie pack like it was Christmas. "I hope he remembers your face," she said. Rodrick didn't answer. He didn't know what to say to that. But before he could walk away again, Tanya asked a question he hadn't expected, and it made him look at her, and himself, a little differently. "You got kids?" Tanya asked. Rodrick didn't expect the question. It came out so casually, like she was asking for directions, but the weight behind it was heavier than it sounded. He looked at her for a second, then gave a small shrug. "No, not mine, anyway. My niece has been staying with me. Her mom works nights at the hospital." Tanya nodded like that made sense to her. "So you're the safe place for somebody." Rodrick paused. He'd never thought of it like that. He wasn't trying to be anyone's safe place. He was just helping out, doing what needed to be done. But the way she said it made something in his chest feel tight. "Trying to be," he said. They stood there for a moment in that weird space between two vending machines and an automatic door that kept opening and closing with each passing shopper. The air outside was getting darker. The store lights made the spot feel colder than it was. Tanya pulled her daughter gently out of the cart and held her in one arm. The toddler stirred, groggy but quiet. "You didn't talk to them like you were scared," she said. "I wasn't," Rodrick replied. "But you also didn't talk like you wanted to fight." He gave her a half smile. "I've fought before. Didn't change much. Talking did today." Rodrick didn't say anything. Not right away. Because truthfully, he wasn't sure what today had changed. If anything. Those men walked off like nothing happened. Vince, the manager, barely took a stand. Most people just stood still and watched. But then again, her son had smiled. And Tanya was still here, standing up straight. That had to count for something. Just then, the automatic door slid open again, and the two men from earlier walked back in. Rodrick's body tensed instantly. So did Tanya's. Her grip on her daughter tightened. Her son slid off the bench and stepped behind her like he didn't want to be seen. But the men didn't look their way. They kept their eyes forward, avoided Rodrick altogether, and walked straight toward the back of the store. Maybe they'd come back for beer. Maybe they'd just forgotten something. But they didn't say a word, didn't make eye contact, didn't even breathe in their direction. Rodrick didn't follow. He didn't need to. Tanya exhaled, long and deep. "I thought they were going to try something." "They won't," Rodrick said calmly. "Not tonight." A few feet away, the teenage cashier, the same one who had looked away earlier, was now pushing a small cart of go-backs toward the register. She paused as she passed Rodrick. "I saw what you did," she said quietly. Rodrick turned to her. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She glanced at Tanya and her kids. "I wish I said something too." Rodrick nodded slowly. "Next time you will." The girl gave a small, almost embarrassed smile and walked off. She didn't look back. Tanya looked down at her son. "Come on, baby." He grabbed her hand without letting go of the cookie pack. Rodrick watched them walk toward the parking lot, the little girl now fully awake and rubbing her eyes against her mother's shoulder. Tanya turned back just once, eyes meeting his for a second. Not a thank you, not a goodbye, just a quiet acknowledgement, real and enough. He turned to leave too, stepping back inside for his forgotten basket. But something about it didn't feel the same anymore. The eggs could wait. So could the milk. But as he walked out into the night, something clicked in him, something personal, something rooted in his past that he hadn't touched in years, and it brought a memory that hit harder than he expected. Rodrick didn't go home right away. He sat in his truck in the parking lot with the window rolled halfway down, letting the warm Baton Rouge air drift in as the sky turned from grey to black. The grocery store lights buzzed behind him, fluorescent and endless, casting long shadows across the lot. He stared ahead for a long time, hands resting on the steering wheel, engine off, not because he was waiting, just thinking, sitting with something heavy. That boy's question, "Are you my mom's bodyguard?" kept playing in his head. And the way Tanya said, "You're the safe place for somebody." He hadn't expected either of those things to stick, but they did. The memory that bubbled up wasn't loud or cinematic. It was quiet and small. Maybe that's why it hit him so hard. He was 10, standing in line with his mother at a corner store just outside Port Allen. It was summer, and his shoes were 2 sizes too small. His mother had been working 3 part-time jobs since his dad left. That day, her EBT card had glitched. The cashier, some guy with a slicked-back mullet, told her to step aside. Loudly. "Next!" the man barked. "Lady can't pay!" Rodrick remembered the people behind them sighing, shuffling. One even laughed. His mother didn't cry. She just stood there, trying to figure out what went wrong. Her hands had trembled on the keypad. Her eyes stayed on the screen like if she stared hard enough, it might fix itself. A stranger behind them, a man in a grey work shirt, stepped forward and paid. Quietly. No speech. No sermon. Just slid a 20 across the counter like it was nothing. Rodrick remembered the man's boots. Scuffed. Dirty. Like he'd been working in them for years. His mother said, "Thank you" 3 times. The man just said, "It's all right," and walked out. Rodrick never forgot that. Not because of the money, but because for one moment someone decided his mom didn't deserve to feel small. And now, all these years later, he'd become that man without realizing it. He sat back in his seat and rubbed his hands over his face. "Safe place for somebody," he muttered, half to himself. He hadn't always gotten it right. There were times he kept his mouth shut when he should have said something. Times he looked away. But tonight, he hadn't. And that felt like something, not redemption, but a start. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the little notebook where he kept grocery lists and budget notes. He flipped to the back, found a blank page, and wrote 3 words. Speak, stand, stay. He didn't know why he wrote it like that, but it felt right. Like a reminder. Like a code. A group of teens in hoodies walked past his truck, laughing and pushing each other, fresh out of the store with Slurpees and bags of chips. One of them caught his eye, gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. Not a big one, just a quick flick of the chin. Rodrick gave a slight nod back. He started the engine. The radio came on low, playing an old Otis Redding song. He let it play for a minute before turning it down. Back on the road, he passed a city bus stop where a mother and her daughter sat waiting under the dull glow of the street lamp. The little girl leaned on her mom's shoulder, half asleep. Rodrick slowed as he turned the corner. That image stuck too. So many mothers out here just trying to make it, holding it all together with frayed threads, carrying the weight of groceries, kids, and judgment like it's just part of the deal. And too often, no one sees them. He pulled into his driveway, turned off the truck, and just sat for a moment longer. But before he went inside, he looked at the notebook again, and made a quiet promise to himself that would echo far beyond that night. Rodrick stood on his porch under the glow of a flickering light bulb. The screen door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the small house smelled like old wood and laundry detergent. On the couch, his niece Lainey was curled up in a blanket, textbook balanced on her knees, pencil in her mouth. She looked up when he walked in. "You were gone forever," she said. He dropped his keys on the side table. "Yeah, ran into something unexpected." "Like what?" Rodrick paused. She asked it so casually, not knowing her uncle had just been standing between a mother and two grown men ready to crush her spirit over a shopping trip. How do you explain that to a 12-year-old without making the world feel worse than it already does? "I saw somebody getting treated badly. I spoke up." Lainey blinked at him. "Did you fight him?" He laughed, soft and tired. "No, didn't need to." "Did they stop?" He nodded. They did. Lainey went back to her book like that answer was good enough, but Rodrick stayed standing. He couldn't stop thinking about Tanya's face, or her son's question, or the fact that for a few minutes that grocery store had turned into a lesson, not just for a scared little boy or a tired young mother, but for everyone in earshot. And for him. Rodrick had spent most of his life thinking that standing up meant stepping in loud, fists first, that unless it was dramatic, it didn't count. But tonight changed that, because what he did didn't come with applause. It didn't trend. No one pulled out a phone. There were no headlines, no viral clips. Just a mother, a kid, and a man who decided silence wasn't an option. And maybe that's what the world needs more of. Quiet decisions that ripple under the surface. Everyday people who see something wrong and speak up anyway. Who choose decency over distance. He walked into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His hands were still tense. He didn't even realize it until he set the cup down. On the counter was Lainey's lunchbox. He opened it out of habit, checking for leftovers she might have forgotten to clean out. Inside was a half-eaten apple and a note he had written her that morning. "You got this. I'm proud of you." He stared at it for a second. 4 simple words on a sticky note. And she'd kept it. That hit him harder than he expected, because it reminded him, words don't have to be loud to stick. They don't have to be perfect to matter. He went back to the living room, sat beside Lainey, and looked over her shoulder at the math homework she was struggling with. "You want some help?" She handed him the pencil without saying anything. As they worked through the problems, he glanced at her. This small, brilliant, stubborn girl who didn't yet understand how often the world would test her, and how important it was to speak up for people when they couldn't do it for themselves. He hoped she'd remember this version of him. The one who stood up for someone who wasn't family, who didn't owe him anything, but needed a shield anyway. That's the kind of man he wanted her to see when she thought of what strength looked like. As they wrapped up the last problem, Lainey looked up and said, "You're like one of the good guys, huh?" Rodrick smiled. A real one this time, trying to be. She nodded, satisfied. Good. They didn't say anything else for a while. The television buzzed quietly in the background. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once, then stopped. Rodrick leaned back on the couch and let the quiet settle. He didn't need to be a bodyguard. He just needed to be somebody who gave a damn. And tonight, that was more than enough. If you've ever seen someone treated unfairly and felt the urge to speak, trust that feeling. Say something. Do something. Small actions carry weight. They teach. They protect. They matter. If this story moved you even a little, share it. Someone else might need to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Real stories like this deserve real voices.